Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host of Dairyland Frights in the spookier podcast, Nightland Frights. And I wanted to thank all my spooky friends out there for listening. I truly appreciate it. Please like and subscribe and rate us 5 stars. It helps me make this a better podcast. And make sure you comment what guests you would like me to have on, what topics you would like me to talk about. It's only going to make this podcast better. So again, thank you so much for listening. And please go to my Patreon. Check that out. Become a Parascani for only $3, a spooky friend for $1. And remember, stay spooky. Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host, and welcome to another episode of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything creepy and mysterious in the Midwest and other places too, because man, I'm just so blessed. I had a great spooky guest continue on the podcast today is Joshua, Phantom Detectives LLC. Welcome, Joshua.
Thank you. I look forward to being here today, and I look forward to have any questions that come in from your end and from your listeners' end.
Yes. And not only is Joshua, he's so busy and he has so much great stuff, but I'll have him tell you that soon here, but also with Dark Matter News. He also was founded with Leo Ashcroft, and correct me if I'm wrong, in 2015,
Yes. Yep.
And then was purchased by your Phantom Detectives LLC in May of 20. And people like Leo Ashcraft, where have I heard that name? He was Art Bell's affiliate director in 2015.
Yes.
So Art Bell, you guys got to know Art Bell if you're in the paranormal, because he's kind of like the grandfather, or whatever you want to say, the GOAT, whatever, of paranormal, and has talked to numerous guests over the years. But like I said, I will have Joshua talk about that, because I've looked through his stuff and I'm like, wow, there's a lot here. So, Joshua, tell me a little bit about, let's start with Phantom Detectives.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that and the organization.
Sure. So let's go ahead and start at the beginning of my backstory and just how I came to about forming Phantom Detectives. I love doing this. So I originally got my start in the supernatural by watching a show called In Search of by Leonard Nimoy. He played Spock on Star Trek. That was kind of one of the first true television shows diving into the paranormal back in the late 70s, early 80s. They used to air reruns all the time on regular television. So I would watch that on top of Unsolved Mysteries with Robert Stack, which was pretty much one of the most cutting-edge shows at its time. Robert Stack always was able to dive into things that nobody else was doing at that time, from UFOs and near-death experiences to murders and conspiracies and all kinds of stuff. So I really enjoyed those two shows. And there was one episode that was really fascinated me in Unsolved Mysteries that was called The Haunting of the General Wayne Inn. It aired on season 1 in 1988. It was about this old English coaching inn that was basically, founded in 1705 as the Wayside Inn and Steeper's Tavern. So basically in 1890s, it was named after a Revolutionary War hero, Major General Anthony Wayne, who I could possibly be related to according to some family. He actually served alongside George Washington in the Continental Army. And over the years of this old English coaching inn, it was also famous dignitaries like Ben Franklin sort of mail there. Marquis de Lafayette, actually one of Washington's assistant French generals, would spend time there. Also, other famous dignitaries, Edgar Allan Poe supposedly wrote several stanzas of The Raven there. So this episode of The Haunting of the General Wayne Inn covered a lot back in 1988. It mentioned how people were seeing there would be a car, a tenant would be outside the building, and a car supposedly would start on its own with no keys in it. The lights would come on and the horn would honk. And mind you, the car was completely locked, and it was one of the tenants, that were in the bar. There was also a story, supposedly, of the old English inn that people would see Hessian soldiers in the basement from the Revolutionary War. These reports have somehow date back to the 1840s when the inn was like a bar. There was also reports of people seeing, that the women would basically be sitting at the bar, and according to that, some of the wine glasses would also rattle and move by themselves, and also some of the ladies would get touched on their neck, and they would think that would be their husbands, and all of a sudden the men's like, "Did you do that?" And they were like, "No, we didn't do that." So
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
the innkeeper, of course, would laugh, and then people would be watching television on the, watching the haunted General Wayne episode of Unsolved Mysteries, and according to the television show, the TV would go clockwise, turn counterclockwise that segment aired. People would also see a British officer looking for his wife's locket. Supposedly, he was killed there in the Revolutionary War, right around the
Mm.
time of the inn. There's, of course, people seeing like a head of a Hessian soldier. So this was a fascinating episode. So after watching this episode around 1990, 91, when I got into school age, I would report. I remember one time seeing a UFO outside of recess. Triangular lights. Very well defined. I was like really started getting into like the paranormal and of course Ghostbusters. Much like
Oh,
watching. Why wouldn't you watch that show? Because it's actually it was always a fascinating movie with like Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, all the other guys, Harold Ramis, and all them. So it was a great television show, and also was also movies and television series. So in the early 90s, I started reading every single book I could by Dr. Hans Holzer, with his legendary case Transmedium Sybil Leak and Ethel Myers. He did a lot of like stuff because he was really cutting edge. He was kind of America's first ghost hunter, and of course
mm.
his daughter Alexandria Lawson, who I know continues the Holzer legacy. And of course, I started reading every book by like Whitley Strieber, like Communion, Wolfen, all the other books that Whitley had wrote. And in the 90s, I remember listening to a radio show host, hey, this is Dreamland with Art Bell. And the minute I like just switching the AM dial one night in 93, I remember
Yeah.
hearing the voice that was absolutely amazing. Like you'll hear Linda Moulton Howe, doing a report from, Texas or, Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. So she would always like talk about the different UFO reports. So she did that for Art on Dreamland, and she's one of the world's leading experts on like crop circles, cattle mutilations, stuff like that. As we got into the 90s, I just started researching more and more of these topics, and I found out there was a lot of different things going on from people seeing like Mothman in West Virginia, and of course
Mm.
Skinwalker Ranch, and all these other topics were just fascinating to me. And of course the Bermuda Triangle, that paranormal, something paranormal there. So in 2002, had the opportunity to investigate the General Wayne, and with my late mentor, Michaeline Mayer. She's since passed
Mm.
away, but in 2002, mind you, paranormal equipment wasn't as developed as it was now. Maybe back then you might have had an EMF meter, you might have had dowsing rods that cross like this, you might have had a tape recorder that where you can, and maybe a digital camera at the most. I mean, that was probably, and a Geiger counter to detect radiation if you're lucky. So this was before all the ghost hunting shows started popping up on television. So,
Mm.
during the basement area, I went down to the basement area of the General Wayne Inn because I actually had the opportunity to investigate there before it was converted to a Jewish synagogue in 2002. I went to the basement and took 3 consecutive photos. Bang, 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 just right on a digital camera. And like one of the photos actually had with green and yellow streaks of light in it. And supposedly, according to Miss Mayer's quantitative analysis, I think you can still view this on. It was written around 2000, 2001 before she passed. That supposedly she has a quantitative analysis of people seeing the Hessian soldier where these green and yellow streaks of light were captured right where the eyewitness accounts are. So according to that, and I took it to the film companies like different like Kodak and stuff, and I tried to take it to different
Yeah.
camera experts just to see just like exposure, and I could have caused it,
Sure.
just get an analysis of the photo, and they had no reasonable explanation why those streaks of light were there. So to me, that was pretty paranormal. That's kind of my first experience as an investigator, just like going with a local Philadelphia team at that time. And then around 2004, the ghost hunters started coming out, the plumbers from Rotor Rooter, Jason Haas and Grant Wilson, along with Dustin Perry, all those other guys, Brian
Mm.
Harnoys, and I've been friends with them for a number of years. Great guys. And I've, had the chance to meet them several times. They're really great. And they founded the Atlantic Paranormal Society. They would be like doing their plumbing work during the day, and then at night they would be ghost hunters. And, that show really kind of fascinated me, the way they go into a
Yeah.
home or a business and they, collect data. They try to debunk stuff. Why is this, client having this experience? Maybe it's a pipe or something. So they were really good at like being able to detect why, say example, someone here is like has having like some kind of EMF, EMF field is going up, and they're getting like a microwave that has a lot of radiation. It could be causing them to hallucinate, to see things. So I always
Mm.
loved how they would try to do what they could. And of course, Most Haunted with Yvette Fielding and Carl Beatty came out around that time, where they would go to British castles and stuff. Always fascinating. And then
Yeah.
the show Paranormal State came out. on television, which was Ryan Buell and his students from Penn State. He founded his organization. It's basically called Ghost Club at that time, and he developed it because cause there was no like Ghost Club at Penn State at that time. So he decided to go ahead and develop his own. And we actually have Ryan Buell's old tri-field EMF meter on our team. Actually, it's so cool. So actually, this thing, I was told the history of it dates back to around 2002, 2001 when he founded PRS, and pretty amazing to have the old tri-field, and we keep it going, we keep it in our inventory. So that's really cool. And then 2008 comes around, Ghost Adventures, of course. I mean, who doesn't love Zach Baggins and what he was doing? And I've watched literally all the episodes from when he first started at Bobby Mackey's Music World in 2008. And that's when Jeff Bellinger joined. He does all the research, writing behind the scenes. I've also met Aaron Goodwin, great guy. So that show is on. So all these shows started pouring out on TV. And I would say I was always fascinating with them, just how they go in, they interview a client about the claims of activity, whether they do a phone interview or a in-person interview, then set historical research and determines if there's anything that past events on the property that, determine why there's something paranormal going on. And then, of course, I do all that on my team. And then, of course, they review the evidence and then try to see if there's any kind of correlation with some of the cameras and different data that they would do. And then they would come back and show the reveal to the client. So that to me was always fascinating.
Yeah.
So in 2004, this is where I kind of really enjoyed things. I was thinking okay, I saw this episode called The Haunting of Summerwind Mansion. So I would love to go through that with you. And Summerwind, of course, is a ruined mansion on the shores of West Bay Lake, Wisconsin. It was supposedly this old ruined mansion that was originally found as West Bay Lake Fishing Lodge in 1914 by a guy named John Frank out of Akron, Ohio. He was a traveling merchant, and he moved from Akron, Ohio to Wisconsin sometime around 1913. So he had this fishing lodge built, and you can stay there for $4.99 a night. So and basically what happened was he kept it for 2 years, and then he sold the mansion over to a future U.S. Secretary of Commerce by the name of a guy named basically Robert Patterson Lamont. Mr. Lamont was a bigwig in Washington. He was a part of President Herbert Hoover's cabinet, basically. I think he was like the director of I can't remember, Secretary of Commerce. So he handled all the business transactions for it's called the Lamont Mansion. And back in those days, during the Lamont ownership, he actually called it Lilac Hills because supposedly there's a lot of lilac trees on the property. So it was called Lilac Hills for a while. And then, so basically Mr. Lamont would basically say, the servants would say, hey, the house is haunted. He would say, oh, grow up. There's no such thing as ghosts. There's no such thing as paranormal, activity. So basically what happened was Mr. Lamont, of course, he was supposing they would see a floating lady right in the kitchen area and, with a white dress, very defined. And this was captured years later by the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, my good friends. What happened was, according to the haunting episode, there would be you can see this on Discovery. They still have it out there from 2000. Mr. Lamont supposedly there would be a basement door that would fly open, revealing the ghostly form. And he took his pistol, fired 2 shots, bang bang, missing the ghost. And supposedly the bullet holes had remained there for many years. And according to the legend, this is just the story, the Lamonts never returned. And Mr. Lamont died around 1948. So here's where the Kiefer owner, so in the haunting episode, she was called Miss Murray. So I guess they had to have stage names to protect the identities of the people. So this Kiefer decides to purchase the place and say, hey, I can make a go of the place. So she gets it for 1948 to 1969. She would normally lease it out to people, and they wouldn't be able to keep up with their payments for some reason, and they will always give it back to her. So over from 48 to 69, there would be all kinds of people that would buy it and then lease it out for a while, give it back. So it went through a continuous ownership. And then it wasn't until the Hinshaw family had moved in the summer of 1969. Ginger Hinshaw first laid eyes on Summerwind. She had to have it. She thought this place to be the perfect fixer-upper for her and her family. And of course, her husband was a construction worker. And according to April, I've been a friend of the Hinshaws for years. I've talked to April Douglas. Supposedly, Mr. Hinshaw's real name was Jim Hill, but they used the name Arnold Hinshaw as a stage name just to protect the identity of those involved. So supposedly it's kind of like the Brady Bunch family. Supposedly she had, April, of course, I think April had 3 or 4 kids. He had 3 or 4 kids of his own, so it's kind of like the old step-by-step family. So he was a construction worker. So What happened was, they bought the property, and they supposedly found a peace pipe, inside the house, and so they would go ahead and start renovating the place to try to make a go of it again. So the Hinshaws, according to the legend, the windows would fly up like this, so they had to nail the windows shut, according to the legend. So the windows would fly open, so they would just drive nails in to keep the windows from flying up. And then, of course, after that, there would also supposedly, they would also hear like different floating, they see the floating lady. They would also hear noises, muffled voices, all kinds of things inside the house. And according to the legend, and this is from the book, there's a book called on Summerwind called The Carver Effect,
Yeah.
The Paranormal Experience. You can still find copies of it, but it's very, very expensive.
Yeah.
I think I've seen them
Yes.
on eBay going for literally in the neighborhood of $300 to $500 if you can find one.
Yes.
But the haunting episode covers most of the experiences that the Hinshaws had. So, according to that, supposedly there was a car that supposedly Mr. Hinshaw had as a construction worker. It caught on fire. And then, of course, things started taking a turn at Summerwind. According to the report, now this is just a story from Summerwind that'll gore your hair. According to the legend, April was like a 10-year-old girl in 1970, 69, 1970, and supposedly Mr. Hinshaw had found this crawl space, so he couldn't fit in there. He was too big, so he removed the dresser out of the way and had his April daughter crawl into the crawl space. And
Oh
according
boy.
to the legend, they actually found a skeleton with black hair, and supposedly she screamed and said, "Hey, skeleton, skeleton!" So they called the police, and the police came like the day later to look at the skeleton, and it wasn't there. So something was going on with that skeleton. Why did it
Mm.
vanish? Was that something that was just fabricated for the book? I obviously wasn't there, so I don't know, but I can just come apart as my research to say that that skeleton that was found might have been like, maybe like either hallucination or their overactive
Mhm.
imagination. It's hard to
Sure.
say for sure. But this is where this story of Summerwind takes a turn for the worse. So after they find the skeleton in the crawl space, Mr. Hinshaw, according to the book, goes mad. Supposedly he starts playing this there's supposedly before the Hinshaw moved in, there was this
Right.
wordless organ in the house,
Right.
and the organ supposedly he would play the organ at all hours of the night, and then the Hinshaw supposedly would be so terrified they had to stay in like one room, and then they fortunately, and also not to mention, they would try having construction workers try to come work on the property, and there's supposedly stories where workers would come to the mansion to do some like painting or drywalling or something like that and priming, and supposedly the tools would like disappear completely,
Mhm.
just disappear from point. So why did the tools disappear? I can't say. But what I can say is from he's researching the history of Summerwind, is that basically according to that, the supposed Ginger had tried committing suicide, and that Mr. Hinshaw was committed to a mental institution up in Canada, was never seen again. Don't know whatever happened to him. I never had a chance to really ask April
Hmm.
those questions.
Yeah.
So the place went back to Miss Kiefer around 71, 72. So what happened now, supposedly, so basically, Ginger had a father named Raymond von Bober. He was a popcorn vendor from Chicago. So he got a go of the place. So he thought, okay, maybe I can make a go of Summerwind again.
Yeah.
So he went ahead and made purchased the property, leased it out. So he had the original blueprint. The minute that supposedly he got it, he never lived on the property. So him and his son Ray Jr. I know Ray Jr. I bought I've known him for a number of years. His son Ray Jr., who's Ginger's brother, they thought, the two, the father and son, Von Bober, thought they could make it go to the place again. So they had a trailer. They never lived in the house. They supposedly they lived on this trailer on the property when they would go working on it. The popcorn said, "Hey, I can make this place go." So they tried to make it in a bed and breakfast, and they ran into similar problems that the Hinshaws did, where they would employ contractors and like tools would disappear, appliances would break down, then and start again. And then
Mhm.
supposedly they would measure rooms from the original blueprints, and then
Right.
supposedly, when they measured the rooms from the original blueprints, they supposedly changed shape. So this is
Right.
just like reports in the book, that all these experiences, and then according to that, there supposedly was, the and this whole history in terms of that, like being able to, they find these appliances breaking down, and then of course there was supposing that Ray Jr. would actually have supposedly see, like he would be upstairs painting, and all of a sudden he would go downstairs and see supposedly visions of the gunshots that Mr.
Yeah.
Lamont had fired, and supposedly he found the bullet holes there.
Hmm.
So, what's interesting is supposedly that the Bobers abandoned the property around 1969, 1978,
Mhm.
79. So they
Yeah.
tried to do everything they could with the property, but there's just nothing that they had, they could do about it. So what they did then, of course, they penned the book, and I think his nickname was Wolfgang von Bober. So his name was Ray Sr., but he used the pen name
Yeah.
Wolfgang von Bober to write the book. And of course, according to the story, there was this land explorer by the name of Jonathan Carver. Now, this is where the Carver ties in. So there's this explorer named Jonathan Carver who supposedly was, had a land grant for the northern third of Wisconsin buried in the property. So now this is just supposedly they had put Ray's father under hypnosis, and they had determined that, maybe that there's some kind of, there's supposedly these old sessions where when Ray Sr. was under hypnosis, he would say, "My name's Jonathan Carver. I'm this explorer from Weymouth, Massachusetts." So that's why the book, how the pen name, The Carver Effect, was born, just from, hey, I had a dream, and here's, this land grant from the northern third of Wisconsin. And people still come to the property today, still digging to find this land grant. And according to the story I heard, supposedly, so people still trespass on the property, still looking for this land grant, and it doesn't exist. According to my friend Craig, it exists somewhere up in England. That's from what I hear. He was buried in a pauper's grave, Carver was, and supposedly it was found in England. So people are still going to the property today and dig up the foundation. So what happened was, around Miss Kiefer passed away. So the place went up for sale again, and three investors. I know Craig knows the Tracy. So Harold and Babs Tracy were thinking, hey, I can make a go of this place again. So Harold and Babs Tracy, they're a couple from La Crosse, Wisconsin. They had purchased it around 85. Mr. Tracy bought it as a wedding anniversary present for his wife, Miss Tracy. So after buying the actual property, they supposedly one night that they would walk up to the mansion at night, and supposedly they would supposedly see the mansion almost like inhaling, exhaling, like breathing on its own. And now that was supposedly a story that they had said around 85, 86. And mind you, the place was pretty much run down by then. There were like bats everywhere. There was people drunk people would be going there and all that. So fortunately, around Father's Day of 88, so revert 2 years later, the place basically, and else according to this, here's what's a really fascinating story I didn't know about until my friend Craig told me, is that around 88, Father's Day 88, the place, lightning and fire took it down. That's what they said in the haunting episode, that lightning and fire struck down Summerwind. And supposedly, what's interesting about that story is that during the Summerwind, during that episode, so lightning and fire took it down, and supposedly all that remains today are the two tall chimneys, the foundation, and the steps. So the place is completely gone. The servants' quarters is gone. The playhouse is gone. All the extra buildings and the mansion itself completely just gone. But what's interesting was there was a neighbor that supposedly before he passed away, his name was Jim Lechner. He supposedly was a neighbor next door. He lived next door to Summerwind back in the late 80s, early 90s. Supposedly he told him that the township, a guy named Harold Ramish, I don't know what his name, something Ramish, and he was like a fire chief there. Suppose he said he was going to be on site, and there was a controlled burn, and a fire department was going to be there. So supposedly, according to this neighbor, the town itself was tired of people trespassing on the property. So basically, they just decided to take it upon themselves. They took bales of hay and they just kind of distributed all the bales and just kind of pretty much just burnt the place down and leveled it. Pretty much like the Tracy's dream of trying to rebuild the place is completely destroyed by the lightning and the fire. And I think the lightning story was just kind of designed to cover, to have the township covered up so they can say, oh well, let's brush this under the rug. We're responsible for it, but we're not going to tell you. So what happened was 26 years later, I come in 2014. And I buy the original blueprints to Summerwind. So there was a website called summerwindmansion.com that was still standing at that time. And there said blueprints for sale. I emailed the seller, make an offer. And the seller turns out to be Ray Von Bober Jr. And I found out that Ginger Henshaw died in 2013. So a year before that, Ray's sister died. And then in 2005, the Ray Sr. actually supposedly passed away after the haunting episode aired. So that's kind of paranormal itself. And then, so basically when I had originally bought the place, and then I started looking out, okay, so I got these blueprints now. So I started seeking out a connection to the owners of the property. So, I see a news feed on YouTube from Summerwind, and I see in the comments, I said, have original blueprints of Summerwind. And then I get a reply back from a Craig Naring from the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters. And Craig says, hey, I have the original blueprints, call me. So we started sitting down, and supposedly he had access to the property. So I had the blueprints and he had access to the property. So
Nice.
what we did was we created the Summer Wind Restoration Society in June of 2014 to restore, rebuild, and relaunch Summer Wind as a haunted bed and breakfast. So the whole idea was, it's kind of my idea, and then kind of Craig kind of ran with it because he knew the owners, so he was going to do all the on-site work while I did like all the radio shows and publicity and stuff like that. So they set up their first camp out in October of 2014, like a benefit on the property to allow like host public investigations to allow people to come out and see the property. This so basically the people trespassing would be able to come there legally, just if they had to sign a waiver and all that, just to protect have a camp out, cook some marshmallows, and so they had the first camp out. And what's cool was Corey Shashja from a local paper came out to document the first ever like summer wind camp out there. So Craig has worked very hard, and then good news is like the property got a lot of traction, and I got helped Craig get on like Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. I helped Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited with the late Kevin Malik and Jennifer Skelsey. They joined as like a supporting group to the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters. Obviously, Kevin had his own society, and so Kevin and Craig went to school together up in Minocqua. So they started like doing like benefits on the property. So Craig can tell you today that the property is still haunted, and supposedly they would do like he's friends with the owners Harold and Babs Tracy, and I heard supposedly last the property was up for sale. So basically, the Tracy's, of course, Craig would actually suppose to have rocks that would flow out of the foundation. Supposedly there was also, they would take one of their investigators, put her in isolation, and have her run an EVP session, near a separate part of the property. And according to that, like a raccoon would fly out of the tree on its own, and when you play the voice recorder back, it would say, "I pushed it," and then supposedly, so this place is still active to this day.
Yeah.
So the key is now, the good news is like 2016, 2017, I reached out to Ghost Adventures, Jeff Bellinger, who does all the writing and research. Last time I heard, he was trying to find help because he's a producer of many ghost hunting shows on TV. Supposedly he was trying to help Craig find an investor, because think about like the potential if you could rebuild. Like it's almost like taking This Old House meets Ghost Hunters. You could rebuild the place and have it investigated after rebuild and turn into a bed and breakfast. It's like you could restore the home as in like This Old House portion, and then you could also restore it as like a and also have it investigate as like a rebuilding a haunted mansion. It could be like the Zach Bagans. And here's something interesting about Summerwind, is that it's supposedly in the November 1980 issue with Walter Cronkite on the cover. It was mentioned as one of the Midwest's most haunted houses, in the 1980 Time Life magazine. I think you could still buy that on like Amazon for literally a couple dollars.
Yeah.
So it's very cheap and it's very accessible. So that was a fun project, and I did it for a number of years. And then around 2015, 2016, I started, I basically want to try to book Craig and Kevin on Art Bell's show. So I said, hey, I called Art Bell's producer one day, when he was working with him. He's a guy from California. So he said, hey, yeah, I'll bring him on my show. It was like a way to, set up and see if Art's interested and bring him on Midnight in the Desert. So he went ahead, brought him in, and we started, becoming friends, and we started working together. I started booking his guests, setting up the contacts, stuff like that. So I started, it really taught me about the importance of networking and the paranormal field. And, I would set up so he gave me the opportunity. I started doing some audio editing, video editing for him, just like simple, volunteer production work. And it was a great way to get yourself, started in the field. So I started working with some of Art's staff members, and then, that helped me network. And then once I also worked with another one of his affiliate director after Leo left. I worked with her for a while. So I got to really work first hand in hand with some of Art's Midnight in the Desert staff members. So that was an absolute honor. And then, of course, years later, I would end up buying the Dark Matter News brand from Leo Ashcraft. And so that was a really cool experience. So that was something I'll never forget. So I, worked with his staff. And then, of course, 2020 came around, and I decided to go ahead. I want to build Phantom Detectives. Much like anybody starting out an organization, I went ahead, created business cards, social media pages, and then I had a team email set up, and then just started doing investigations under the new banner. And then what I also did was, had a website constructed from the ground up, because obviously we needed a website so people can reach us. So we launched that website in January 2021. It's growing substantially since then. It's a beautiful looking website. And
it is.
so basically, we did our first pre-investigation with Brian J. Cano from a show called The Haunted Collector. Brian, of course, has been on many ghost hunting shows with John Zaffis, and he did a public ghost hunt at the Selma Mansion, which we'll talk about later on in this episode. But we took all that knowledge from Brian. He showed us how to run EMF meters, how to properly do an EVP session, how to use the dowsing rods, how to use the SLS camera, how to use pendulums. Just gave us a great crash course. So we took that knowledge and applied it to our first investigation. And I brought one of my old team members over from my new team because I felt like the old team I was on wasn't messing in a way that we should have. So we went ahead and found the Phantom Detectives in August 2020, and then just started doing investigations. We had our first investigation at the Sanderson Museum, and the Sanderson Museum is a very cool place. It's a very active location. So the Sanderson Museum is this location that is obviously right in Chadsford, Pennsylvania. It's got all kinds of really fancy letters from like Helen Keller to Sitting Bull to Shirley Temple. Mr. Sanderson was a poet, a musician, used to host square dances in the area. He was just a very talented guy. So he was actually, so we set up all the equipment. And what's fascinating was in this violin room, where all these violin cases are, there's like 3 or 4 cases, and there's also Mr. Sanderson's chair. You can still see violins that he used on display in the mansion or the museum. So we actually, during this time period, we had the security camera going off, our EMF detectors, batteries completely drained on their own, and we also had we picked up a orb, a very defined or colored orb. So I have no reasonable explanation why that happened. So that was a pretty wild night to really launch Phantom Detectives in December 2020, and it was kind of a start of our journey. And ever since then, we've been getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, that is awesome. Joshua, that is so much, that you've worked so hard to get to where you are and everything like that. And I think that's kudos to you, because it does take a lot of hard work. But I want to back up really quick.
Sure.
And tell people again, I believe it's on YouTube, In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. This is what I highly recommend to people who didn't grow up with it, is put it on YouTube, turn off the lights, and it will freak you out to this day. Last month, I'm like, I gotta watch some old In Search of. So I put on one, I believe it was a Bigfoot one, and I put on that one, and I turned off the lights, and they have this eerie music. You're just super, Leonard Nimoy's voice is just picked for it. So I highly recommend to check that out. The other thing really quickly too with Unsolved Mysteries is one of my favorite episodes that actually created a movie called Jeepers Creepers.
Oh, I heard of that, yes.
There's an episode that I highly recommend. I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately. But this couple, it was like in the 60s or something. They're just driving down this road, and I think they're lost. Because remember, folks, there was no GPS at that time.
Me
and Joshua would have to pull out a map. Or, God forbid, you would pull over and ask someone, where in the hell is this place, right?
Yes.
Right. So the thing was, this couple, they're driving by and they see this van. And out of this van, they see this guy take this, what looks like a human body wrapped in a sheet. And he takes it and he goes around and he puts it he looks like he's putting it in the cellar of his house or something like that, basement of his house. And they just freak out, which everyone would freak out because you don't know, right, what's going on. This is really weird, And it turns out then this vehicle, the guy must have saw him and starts chasing them. And this couple is again, they're freaked out. They're just a regular American couple, mom and dad or whatever. And they're being chased by this guy to finally get away from him. And anyway, this guy from the Jeepers Creepers, I don't know how he got upon it, but he figured it out. And on YouTube, they do so they'll show the Jeepers Creepers beginning of the movie, and then they'll show the actual footage. They'll show the footage from the show Unsolved Mysteries. They compare. They put it in, a couple screens so you can kind of see it, and you're like, "Holy shit!" That's crazy.
Right.
So
And it's so funny because you mentioned the unexplained in search of. Because here's something funny. Now there's something called the unexplained with William Shatner. It's funny how Leonard Nimoy's own castmate, and now basically William Shatner is hosting a show because he was Captain Kirk on the original
Yes.
1966 to 1970 Star Trek. So it's funny how his castmate on Star Trek ended up doing like something years later with another paranormal show.
Yeah. Yeah, it's full circle, right? And
Yes.
then a couple of things about Summer Wind. So Jeff, I don't know if you know Jeff. I can't remember his last name right now from Badgerland Legends. He's been on the show, and we did a episode of Summer Wind on the podcast here, Dairyland Frights. But anyway, he was not invited. He must have known someone from the Fox Valley
Ghost
ghost hunters. He was invited, and they let him to camp on there. And he told me it was really funny because he said they say, oh, just get a tent, and you go over there, no big deal. Well, I don't know if he was impatient or whatever, but he says he's sleeping and he's having these weird dreams about Indians and about all this weird stuff dealing with Native Americans. And he wakes up and he goes to, I believe, the gentleman who is the head of it, Craig, and he says, hey, I just want to let you know, I didn't get much sleep because I've had all these weird dreams. And I guess Craig or somebody else said, that's because you're sleeping on Native American bones. You're actually sleeping on them right now. And he's like, what?
Yeah, and supposedly, like, there's like burial mounds on the property, and I do know, like, supposedly Craig thinks that there might be a couple Native American like places where there could be like places that according to that, that is. What's interesting was I know Jennifer Skelsey, she's part of the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society 11. The late Kevin's wife, I think she still runs NWPS to this day.
Yeah.
I think that she's taken it over now from Kevin, but I know supposedly she said that she was picking up one time on the spirit of actually Lucy, like that little girl Lucy that was supposedly found inside the crawl space at Summerwind back in the sometime back in the 1970s. So what's interesting about that story, and then you had mentioned the burial mounds. There's like supposedly burial mounds all over the property. So I definitely think that, there's several spirits that are haunting that. I don't think it's the Jonathan Carver thing. I think it's Native American spirits. I think there is also, possibly that little girl Lucy, that floating lady that's been seen. And what's interesting was Craig, I think around 2017, he was doing World's Largest Ghost Hunt, which is an organization founded by, person who taught me investigating, Brian J. Cano and Maria Schmidt. Maria, of course, started it with Brian, and then Maria eventually ended up taking over full rights to it. But according to the legend, or the floating lady, Craig had captured this floating lady up near the steps of the Summerwind property. I think it's on somewhere on the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters Facebook page. You would have to probably join them and like search and under the group, like, and see if it's there. But I know they had captured this floating lady above the steps, and for World's Largest Ghost Hunt back in 2017. The main problems they were having was when they were investigating they couldn't stream too well. But the key is, like I said, the evidence is what comes back from it. That's the key. So they had pictured this floating lady. So I think Craig might still have that video somewhere, in this group where you can always ask him. So I think if you've ever had him on the show, he might still have that footage.
And one other quick thing with that too is my buddies in the paranormal, like me, he was taking a motorcycle trip up to northern Wisconsin, and he, and I told him where Summerwind and stuff. He goes, oh, I'm going to check it out, right? So this is, to this day, I don't know how this happened. But anyway, he started down the path to Summerwind, and it's not really just so people understand, like Joshua said, it's private property. It's no trespassing. You got to be careful when you go on it.
Yes.
I don't want to get anyone arrested or anything. It's stupid, right? Or whatever.
Yeah.
But anyway, my buddy he was going towards Summerwind, and he gets up to Summerwind, and all of a sudden, this sheriff comes out of nowhere and says, you need to leave right now. You need to go right now. Like right now, or I'm writing you a ticket and I'm arresting you. And my buddy's like, oh, okay, sorry, I'm sorry, the guy was just adamant about it. And my buddy, got out of there, and the sheriff followed him, and he's like, what is going on? Like, this is okay. And then the sheriff flipped his lights on, and he pulled my buddy over, and my buddy's like, are you kidding me? I'm leaving. What are you talking about? Right. And the sheriff gets out of his vehicle and comes up to him, and he goes, listen, I'm really sorry, but I just don't want people on this property. And my buddy's going, hey, I was just looking around. I'm not going to hurt anything. I'm into the paranormal. I'm just going to take some pictures. He goes, look, I'm going to tell you right now, that place is cursed, and
Right.
people who are on it sometimes have issues. And
Right.
I've had people like call me, and I've had 911 calls saying that they've been attacked, that all this stuff. So he goes, I'm
And
just trying to help you. I'm trying to be not trying to be a jerk. I'm just trying to help you. Do not go on there unless you're
there's
with a team.
supposedly, Craig had told me that people
Yeah,
that were on the property trespassing, they would take a brick from Summerwin, and
yeah,
supposedly
right.
they would take the brick home from Summerwin, and all of a sudden, like within like I would say an hour or 2 hours of going home, they would supposedly total their car without insurance, and that's just
Yeah.
one of the many stories that I've heard from Craig. That supposedly, if you take something from Summerwin, even like a little small
Hmm.
piece of stone,
A rock,
supposedly
right?
the rock.
Yeah. Oh, that's it for a
So
sec.
it's very interesting. Sure.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing to remember is, like, again, any of these sites you go on, you really got to remember you can't just, I don't know, your curiosity get the best of you, because sometimes it can cause real issues. I've talked to paranormal investigators, like I said, who have told me they
Yeah.
will have someone who's maybe a little too overzealous, and they're like really getting excited about something, and they're
Right.
dealing with certain things, and you got to be like, hey, look, you got to calm down, because these
Right.
spirits are feeding off that energy,
Oh yeah.
and they're going to use that, maybe to hurt you, or maybe
Right.
to gain energy from you. So I just thought that was really interesting. But so let's get into, let's talk a little bit. You talked about the history, which was amazing, but tell me, Ashwa, about your first paranormal experience. Like, when is the first time you had a paranormal experience and went like, wow, what was that? Was it when you were a little
Sure.
kid? Was it?
I
Yeah.
would say probably for me, like it would be years later, a couple years before I found a fan of detectives. That was when I was on a previous team
Yeah.
at that time. It was a place called Penhurst, and Penhurst is a
Oh, right.
pretty crazy active location here in Pennsylvania. It's one of the most haunted places in all of the country. I can say
Yes.
from experience, I've been there multiple times. I've obviously investigated there multiple times. And what's interesting about Penhurst is it's one of the most active locations that you'll find. And I can tell you, it used to be an insane asylum for people that were mentally ill that were being treated. They would get basically these experiences. So for me, Penhurst has to be hands down one of the most haunted places. And it was founded in the early 1900s, and supposedly it was people who were mentally committed. So we were in the one time, me and my former team member were in the Philadelphia building, and at the bottom of the area, you can still access the basement area. Fortunately, at that time, other areas of the building were just not safe, like for getting hurt and stuff like that. So Penhurst staff. So, but what's interesting was I suppose it took a thermal imaging camera, and the thermal
Mm,
imaging is basically where you pick up hot and cold spots. Where you point and click, and you take hot and cold spots. And what's interesting was on this rusted out iron door, I took some point and click with the cold spots, and then literally after doing that with the thermal camera, I saw this on this rusted out iron door, this pair of cold shoes. And mind you, nobody was
mm.
in that area when they took them.
Oh.
Nobody, it wasn't a heat signature. Like, because obviously, if you touch, say for example, you touch that rusted out iron door, you can see your handprint
Mhm.
being a red or orange. So you knew that was obviously you. This was a cold spot on a rusted out iron door, and I still have no
Mm.
reasonable explanation. And then later that night,
Yeah.
also, Grant Wilson was there from Ghost Hunters, basically. He could obviously vouch for this because we were in the Mayflower building.
Mm.
I broke off from the doing a public investigation, and I was with another group at that time. And I went
Mm.
down to like the second or third floor, and literally we thought we heard the children's voices and footsteps on the in the Mayflower building. That was very, very interesting. That happens. I can conclude like that was a paranormal experience that will always shape me. Hearing the children, laughter of children, and then also hearing like
Yeah.
bangs. Also, a bunch of little footsteps going on the floor above us. So I
Oh.
definitely think there's a lot of children on that property. Saying, "Oh, that's an experience that I will never forget."
I bet. I bet. So let me ask you this too. There's so many places you can explore, and there's so much paranormal around the world, and in the United States. How do you choose your location? Like, how do you go about with your team and go like, let's go here? Like, how's that process
Sure.
work?
So what I do is the good news is I have a database of many places. I actually go to my friend Dave Giuliano. He has a place called the Ghost Hunter Store. It's a well-known like shop where you can buy paranormal equipment. He has an old website called theshadowlands.net. He built this website in 1994 when he first got a start in doing documenting the paranormal, because Dave's been doing this
Hmm.
for over 30 years. One of my mentors in the field, and so Dave actually created theshadowlands.net. And what's great about it is you can go to any state on the Shadowlands.net, and I think he's planning on relaunching it, but it's still got a huge database of haunted locations. You can
Mm.
go, for example, you could type in Wisconsin, and you'll see like the Dartford Cemetery and Summerwind, and all these other
Right.
places in the you know uh, the Berlin Tannery where Craig used to do investigation. So just a massive database of stuff in every state, and you can see it's a mile long. Usually, I think Dave has updated it, but he's planning on eventually relaunching that website at some point in the future. But it's a great resource. Those Shadowlands.net has like tons of places where people could go. And the nice thing is, all you got to do is once you find a place that's in that database, you can pretty much just contact, then Google search the business and see if they allow investigations. Email them and say, hey, we're X, Y, and Z, the local paranormal team from Anchorage, Alaska. We'd like to investigate this ship, or we
Oh,
want to
sure.
investigate this, old house. What do we do? A lot of times you can talk to the staff inside these places, and then sometimes they
Nice.
may not allow you, but they might allow you. It just depends. Every business owner is different. I can only say the places that we've been. I've used that website a lot to find haunted locations. So the Shadowlands.net, and of course, there's also a new one. I want to talk about this new directory that my friend Josh Vandy Wettering, he has a group
Sure.
called Kakuna Paranormal. And Josh, of course, actually, there used to be a website called paranormalsocieties.com. It was this old directory founded by Bill Wilkins in 2007. Unfortunately, Bill had a website. So, fortunately, in 2020, he was basically saying he needed help. He used to post cases on this Twitter page called Paranormal List, where he would show
Mm.
like need investigators in Houston, need investigators in Los Angeles, need investigators in Baltimore, Maryland. So he would post all these different locations. Bill vanished in 2020, but his friend Josh from Kakuna Paranormal had decided to go ahead and rebuild the directory. So he brought his friend David, and they programmed paranormalsocieties.org is like the follow-up to paranormalsocieties.com. So Bill vanished in June of 2020, leaving 4,892 teams. So if you have any paranormal
Wow.
enthusiasts and teams, you can also post on this website. And Josh has got like all the locations from Wisconsin already on paranormalsocieties.org. So there's another resource if you have listeners in Wisconsin. And like I said, you can always register for the database and list your services. And also, if you're looking to join a team, you can do that. So, this new directory has great potential, and the
Nice.
Shadowlands.net. And I know Bill was also trying to develop before he vanished something called paranormalhotspots.com, which was going to be
Mm.
another developed location. But Josh just took paranormalsocieties.com and paranormalhotspots.com and just put them all on one site. So it's a great way for people that need, answers to things. And of course, all the case service system is now under request help on the new directory. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that Josh has kept the Paranormal Society's legacy going from his friend Bill. So it's
Yeah.
a great resource. So I would say the main resource is probably the Shadowlands.net with Dave Julian. It's hands down the
Yeah.
best database.
That's amazing. Yes, I'll definitely share that with my paranormal friends who I've interviewed and I obviously friends with and everything like that. Because I love paranormal investigators. The reason I love you guys so much is because one, you're braver than me. If I saw a ghost, I'm not gonna lie, Joshua. If I saw one, you would be seeing me hightailing it out of there.
He'd
As
be
well as I think you're taking away some of the stigma of the paranormal, right? So let me ask you this. Have you
yes.
ever been in a conversation with someone where they go, Joshua, man, you're just faking it. It's all a joke. You guys are just making this up. Come on,
I,
man. Well, what do you say to that person?
I usually say, well, obviously you must not have an open mind. Were you there actually at the location? Basically, were you
Right?
there actually documenting the stuff and setting up the equipment and having stuff go off? Oh, well, unless you're actually physically at that location, how can you
Hmm.
say that technically that there's not life after death? And basically, when there's been so many, almost everybody, every single religion in the world believes in some kind of spiritualism or
Yeah.
life after death. I mean, some people believe in reincarnation. Some people believe in either going to heaven or hell. Some people are Muslim, but the key is like every single major religion on earth believes in some kind of life after death.
Yeah.
And that's what I would always argue. And not to mention, basically, just all you got to do is just draw your own conclusions, get out on and actually see how an investigation is done. Until
Yeah.
you're actually there doing it and actually having seeing it for yourself, you're not going to be able to, experience it unless you go out and do it. And that's what I would tell those people who have never done a paranormal investigation is go out and try one and see, set up equipment and then see how stuff goes off and, pick up, EVPs and then like playback stuff. And if you find out you're the only one in the room, there's a voice being found, or you pick up like a strange mist or, a strange picture, go out and
Mhm.
do it. And then you'll find out firsthand. That's, I think,
Yeah,
best advice.
absolutely. So dealing with that, what would you tell someone who's listening to this and they're like, I want to try this. I want to try to do my own paranormal invest. Now, I've heard two different things from paranormal friends I've interviewed. One, they say never do your own house. Would you agree with that? That
Yes,
you
I
never
agree.
should investigate your own house.
Yes,
Is that
because a lot of times that evidence will be skewed because you're the only one there doing the research and doing the investigation. So I often say try to avoid your house because technically, like no one's going to believe you anyway if you do capture some kind of piece of
Mhm.
evidence because they're going to say, well, you faked it, or it was something that you did. You could have been talked inside the EVP recorder to pretend like you're some kind of spirit voice. So that's why I often say I often try to stay away from investigating your house. Always allow a team to come in, but make sure the team has a clean criminal history. You don't want, like,
Mm.
for example, some a convicted felon going to your
Oh, sure.
15-year-old daughter's room, for example. So
Yeah.
you want to make sure that that's why Josh, the one thing that Josh is standard about paranormalsocieties.org, for every team that applies into the directory, he
Oh,
does research on every single member. He does like
oh,
criminal background checks. He does like, so
amazing.
you got to make sure that you have like a certain protocol to be listed on that directory. Number one, you have to make sure that that you're clear of any criminal history. So he does all his
Yeah.
research and all that stuff before he lets people in into his house. He wants to know who's coming to his house, which I can't blame him.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing they say is, and I don't know if you guys do this, but they say when you go into a place, whether it be Pemhurst Asylum, whether it be wherever, a house, a residence, let's say you're going to Ohio Reformatory, a jail, it's very famous, whatever.
Right.
One of the things they say is before they go in, they say, I'm John. I'm just gonna use my name. I'm John with C
Paranormal.
Phantom, whatever. I want to let you know we're here to look around and experience something to that effect where you're just not diving in, where you're just not going in and just kind of. How do you guys do it when you approach a house or whatever you guys are working on? How do you guys start out? What do you guys do?
So usually the first thing. So usually what we'll do is we have a streamlined process. We have made our investigation process better. Now, like clients needing investigation done, they got to go through the website. So my idea was I took a form that PRS was doing Ryan Buell, and I kind of remade it around because this is something that PRS used to do. And Holly told me when she worked under Elfie that Elfie taught her, and I took it and learned it from Holly. So the idea now is like basically what we do is people have to go through the website either on Discord. We have a Discord server, people can reach us, and we also have the website. So you go to request help. You click the link. It takes you to our sister website, darkmatternews.com, because our fan detectives website can't display the form because it has to be in WordPress.
Mm,
So obviously
okay.
you click that link, you fill out all the information. We need to know like, what's any kind of phenomena, how's it affecting the family? Is there anything are you having hallucinations? We just need as much information as possible about before we do an investigation, just to understand how we can help this family. So once the client fills out the form, it goes to our case manager and our psychic medium Melissa Ferrazano, who's also our assistant investigator. So
Mm,
when I'm not around and Rick's not around, she comes out and runs the investigation. So it goes to her
mhm,
email, and then she'll say in our group chat, because we text each other in group chats, like three of us on our investigation team, and she'll say, "Hey, I got a case from client A. They're having paranormal experiences, and the children are being affected. They're requesting to, they need our help." And what we do is that we said, okay, well, why don't we set up an audio interview? So much
mm.
like you've seen on the paranormal television shows, where you see
Sure.
like someone from a team interview a client, maybe some from some historical society as well. We just do ours over the phone. So the beautiful thing is, I like to talk about Rick Warner because Rick is fantastic. He runs his own UFO. He's a director of investigations for his own UFO organization called Extraterrestrial Research Center. He has many certificates in field surveying, field research. He joined us in 2021 in March.
Oh, nice.
Where I asked him to come out because he had all these credentials from MUFON, because he knew how to interview people, document, like, do all the quantitative analysis. He's got certificates from the Delaware MUFON. So I provided him to come in. So he'll do an audio interview, and based on, because he knows exactly what questions to ask, information about, like, the
Mm.
history. He kind of finds out everything to know what's going on. Then what we do is we listen to that audio interview, and based on the information that's contained in the audio interview, we decide whether or not to take on the case. So we'll have Melissa email back and say, hey, either A, we're taking on this case, or not. Melissa will, she's kind of like our Donna LaCroix, like just like how ghost hunters used to have Donna work out like all the details
Yeah.
with the client. Melissa's kind of like our Donna. So she does like booking of the investigation, the date, the time, the location, all that stuff. And she does great work besides doing psychic medium readings. So once we do that, that's the process. You go through the website now, you fill out the form, and then boom. That's if a client wants an investigation done. And sometimes, of course, we'll have other businesses contact us through our email. They'll email us through our website.
Mhm.
And then, like, instead of skipping out right to the form, they'll say, hey, would you guys be interested in checking this tavern out, for example? And then we'll say, sure. And what's going on? Then I'll have them email me like information that'll go to Melissa, and then Melissa will still do the same process.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really professional way to do it and everything. One of the things I guess I would ask you with that is, what do you do? Because I've had some paranormal investigators tell me is like sometimes you go into a place and for lack of a better word, like that person needs mental help. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you've interviewed that, you go in there, you start investigating, you're like, okay, this isn't about ghosts or spirits or whatever. This is about this person getting mental help. Do you have anything where maybe you deal with that?
Yeah,
Suggest or
we
yeah.
have counselors and stuff like that. Like we have
Oh,
like a
great.
team of people, like they're like external helpers, but like it's kind of like how Ryan Buell, when he would have people that would call, the Paranormal Research Society would call them. He would bring in like different trained counselors, and we actually have a network of people like counselors and stuff like that can help us as we continue to grow and get bigger. That are
Yeah.
trained in like psychology, and they can really help. They have background mental health treatments. Sometimes we'll refer people that are trained counselors to some of our external help, and then they'll have that person sit down with them and do therapy with them, just to try to start treating them if they are having experiences. So it's great to have, or knowing that I can just
Mhm.
pick up a phone and call
Yeah.
somebody that's an expert in like guidance counselors, counseling to help these people. If they have a drug problem, I can immediately call like a drug rehab clinic and get them there if they have
Nice.
some kind of problem going on. So it's good to know that we have external
Mhm.
resources where these people can just call, or I can call and get them help.
I love that. I love that. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been on an investigation, whether it be a person's home or, again, a place where you guys are in a room and you've all gone kind of like, man, there's something dark in here. I don't like it. We got to leave.
Oh
This
yeah,
isn't
definitely.
right.
In
Yeah,
fact,
go
I'm going
ahead.
to talk about two cases actually. One that just
Yeah,
came
go
up
ahead.
from us. So there was one case that we did. We haven't done too many demonic cases yet, but we have had a
Mm,
few. We did one for this client named DH. He lives in Kirkwood, Pennsylvania, and DH, of course, reached out to us through our website, phantomdetectives.org. Supposedly, he was having all kinds of crazy experiences, like where his family, supposedly his kids were seeing like dark shadows in this basement. They're supposed to be hearing like footsteps, and they were also
ooh,
just terrified, where the family pretty much had to stay at the upper part of the house, like not even anywhere near them. There was like even like a living, like a separate apartment upstairs. They lived in like one room or two rooms in that upper part that was either they were renting out. So that people that were renting out that upper part just left, so they were staying up there. They were so terrified to stay in their own home, so they reached out to
mm,
Melissa, our case manager, and then so we set up. Literally, this was days after we did the Lightship Overfalls, which is like one of Lewis Deller's most haunted locations. We had to expedite this case because this client was having a lot of crazy experiences. So we set up the interview, and so we did the investigation November of 2022. And this
mm,
client, we actually started running different equipment, and literally after running the equipment, we actually picked up, we got cussed at on, our voice recorders. We got the words "f you,"
Wow.
and then
Oh,
there's another voice that was picked up on our security camera because we used a Zuzi W4 Pro, which is a great, really nice NVR style security camera. We actually picked up "I want you to go." You can hear that on our website, phantomdetectives.org. You can
wow.
hear "I want you," like that, kind of like that Jason, "I want you to go." We got
Yeah.
that. We also, what's kind of weird was we were using something called the SLS camera. So the SLS camera is a really great device if you know how to use it right, but you got to be
Mm,
very careful with it. So the SLS camera was developed by a guy named Bill Chappell, who was developed the gear tech from Ghost Adventures. So Bill Chappell's been a longtime friend of mine. He just retired and sold the digital dowsing product line over to Ghost Stop. So I've known Bill for a long time. Great guy. So he created the SLS camera. What the idea is, it uses the Xbox technology to
mm,
map entities on this camera. So using stick figures, it'll create like a little stick figure on it, and basically it'll say the word anomaly. But you got to be very careful because the
mm,
SLS camera can be a wonderful piece of technology, but if you don't know how to use it, you, for example, you have a chandelier hanging off a wall, or if you have
mm.
or like a wall ornament, or some kind of door, anything that's hanging on the wall, like a picture frame or a water bottle, like on a bed, it could very easily create a false mapping. So what we do is we aim it against solid walls. And the night that we were doing that investigation of this client DH's home, we started
Mm.
getting these really weird. I've never seen this before, and I've never seen it after. These black oil spills on the wall, literally, like
Ooh.
pretty much like you could see like little horns pointing out on the oil spill. They would just change shape from a
Oh,
circle to a person, and then it would evolve into, like, you could see like a legged animal. I mean, it was really weird. And I asked several experts in the field, "Do you think there's something wrong with the mapping, the technology?" And I asked
yeah.
Bill, "Is this the SLS?" Is a digital dowsing SLS cameras? There's only like 25 in existence, and we got one of the 25. Is there some kind of problem with this? Is it software mapping issues? And he said, "No,
Yeah.
I've never seen this before, so it's never happened since." So those oil spills
Wow.
were coming all over the camera.
Wow.
Don't know why that happened. Besides, we also, on the shadow trackers, you can also see them going off. We also set up the Christmas lights. I like to call them the long. I can't remember. Oh, the long. We have a long string of Christmas lights that I can't remember what they're called, but the tripwire EMF sensors. Those were
Tripwires.
going off.
Yeah.
Yep. Those were going off like crazy. So that was absolutely insane. And the good news is Rick and Melissa, and what's scary was Rick actually was like, I can see, like, he was sitting in his chair just for a few minutes taking a break in the basement. I can see literally his like pressure was building up on his chest. And you could see, like, we were using something like
Oh,
one
wow.
of our EMF meters. We got this really new, it's only like $15-20. It's one of the best EMF meters out there, called the A+1 EMF meter. It lights up all the way up to 2000 milligauss. You can see when Rick was feeling pressure on his chest, literally the EMF meter spike up like crazy, and we were not near any
Wow.
electrical lines or any kind of appliances that could have caused it to go up. This whole Rick, you could see like someone, he's like almost like coughing, and he's having problems. Like, you could feel the pressure on his chest. And I said the Lord's Prayer, please, get my
Yeah.
team member out, please, in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, I command you to leave his body. And with the minute I said that, like, literally everything dissipated. He was back to normal. But he was like, literally, you could
Ooh.
see them pressuring on his chest like that. So that's the danger. So the good news is that we did. Rick and Melissa are very trained and well staged, so they know how
Yeah.
to do cleansings and all that. They're much better than I am. I'm more of the
Yeah.
historian of the group. But they
Mhm.
went ahead and did the cleansings, and literally within, like, I think within 30 minutes or 40 minutes after doing, they went ahead. Rick was using holy water from Jerusalem to put a cross on every door. We blessed the house. You can feel a difference from the house
Yeah.
that we investigated. It just felt like, absolutely, just like, it was like, felt like, the gates of heaven opening up. It was just such a difference. And of course we also use the Native American technique of using sage too, which is,
Yeah.
just using smudge sticks, where you can just go in and try to just tell this,
Mhm.
spirits to leave. So there
Right.
was something definitely going on there. And I think what happened was there was probably some kind of satanic ritual. Like, it might not have been on that house, because I think the house was
Mhm.
pretty new. It was built in the 90s. But there might have been a previous house on the property where someone was messing with
Sure.
Ouija boards, could have done some kind
Yep.
of, ritual or occult thing going on. And then that's what pretty much caused the activity to spike. So I
Mhm.
definitely conclude that was a crazy case. And we just got contacted by a lady named Stephanie in Broomall, Pennsylvania, in Delco,
Okay.
where like the family's so terrified they had an investigation on this place, supposedly called The Unexplained. It was like a British version of The Unexplained Caught on Camera. It was on Discovery Plus for her case. It was been on the national television show. So she chose us to reach out and schedule a phone interview with Rick. So we got to figure out
Nice.
how to help this client out in Delco, and they found us right on Google search. So we're going to be having a Wikipedia page coming in the next couple of months. Sometime in,
Nice.
so we're going to start developing that in August, September, and we're going to launch that before the end of the year. We also got paranormal tours coming up later on this year, and we also got a camp paranormal idea like PRS used to do, where we have like guest speakers. So we're working on that. So there's a lot of things that are coming up that are exciting as we continue to grow. So we got a couple television appearances coming up. So it's really a lot of fun. The best thing I could recommend, for people that are needing teams and help, try to do. If you're having like any kind of like demonic activity, try first to, before you call somebody, try to use smudge sticks. You could buy sage at any standard like first-hand shop. Just type in like smudge, local like looking for like a place that sells sage. You can find sage at most stores, and burn it,
Hmm.
and just always try to recommend clients to try to do their own, and say the Lord's Prayer. And we also have the Saint Michael's, the Archangel's Prayer on our website under articles, or people can just go
Oh,
and
okay.
find that. So everything's all laid out there. So it's great. Always try to recommend people to recommend doing their own
Yeah.
cleansings. If they can't, then we'll come in and do it for you.
Yeah, that is amazing, and that is not only me, but I'm sure everyone would thank you for doing that, because people don't understand it. Some of the stigma of paranormal is, usually mental health or something, but there are some things you just can't explain. There's just some things going on that you need
Exactly.
help
That's
with.
why science can't, because science can't explain everything, and that's why
No.
we're very quantitative based. Like we like to use, which is like the scientific method, which is basically create a hypothesis and develop it, and then see if you get results. You know.
Yeah. So I have a couple quick questions before we
Sure.
wrap up, because I could talk to you for hours, Joshua. I mean, you're blowing me away with all this great stuff. One of the questions is, do you ever use the Estes method,
Oh
with the
yes, in fact.
blindfolds? Go
Oh,
ahead.
we actually create a better version. We don't use the standard essays method. Yes, we've improved it. So what we do, I'll talk about this. This was during Global Ghost, and we call this the Chairs Warner method. So what we did, we took the Etsy's
Hmm.
method and put it on steroids. We put our psychic. So imagine like where you obviously take. So
Love it.
what we do is we put these really nice. There's a group called War Party Paranormal. They have these really cool Delco orange glasses. We put
Hmm.
these on our psychic medium Melissa. So she has these orange glasses on her, and then
Yeah.
we, of course, we put up the blindfolder like usual, and then then what we do is we also add an EMF meter and a voice recorder, and we use the
Hmm.
new PSB7 Pro that was developed by DAS Distribution. It looks like it's got a nice orange fluorescent orange, kind of orange black finish, and it lights
Yeah.
up just like the Mel meter. So we use the
Yeah.
EMF meter, we use the voice recorders, and then what we do is we take the tripwire EMF and put it in a circle around the Melissa, and then we have her hold a crystal skull. We took it, we called that the Chairs Warner Spirit Box session, and then we start scanning the AM/FM dials, and she picks up stuff like amazingly. Haven't been taught by Cindy Kozla from the Holzer files. That's one way we do it. And then we do another way where we took the blindfold off Melissa, and then we start doing the Estes method again, but this time we have her, hold crystals basically in her hand, and then she uses a scrying mirror, and we scan the ghost box that way. So that's version
Ooh.
one, version two. So we created our own, version of the Estes method that I think is better than any other paranormal team out there. It's really great, and it gets great results, especially using a psychic medium. Then what we can also do, use the Obvious 5. And the
Yeah.
great thing about the Obvious is we use it mostly just for the word bank mode, because there's tons of other modes on the Obvious. But the beautiful thing is, if you can take your psychic medium and then use the Obvious, which is using the EMF fields to generate words and responses, if your psychic medium comes up with stuff from the reads that match the Obvious, you have strong correlation. You got something paranormal going on.
Yeah, that's amazing. So my other question, have you ever had a spirit attach itself to you or someone on the team and they brought it home?
Not yet, because I think
Ooh.
we're very good. We actually bless ourselves with holy water if it's like some kind of demonic case, or we always say the Lord's Prayer. We always we haven't had a single problem yet, because we do
Oh, great.
investigations differently. We're not like Zach Baggins, where you say you did it to him, now do it to me. We actually do it. we actually do, I think that's more for like the entertainment value of,
Yeah.
so a lot of these shows are just entertainment. Like I believe 50% of them are real
Yeah.
legit paranormal investigating, and then fifty
Sure.
percent of them are like, they have scripts where they got to act like there's something going on, because I'm sure they're told by like bigwigs and like, suits basically say, here, you got to do
Mm-hmm.
this in order to keep the show on
Mm-hmm.
TV. So
Yeah.
obviously a lot of them, I think 50% of it's real, 50% of it's all like just, imagine overactive, just pretending to be like, it's like being like a WWE wrestler on TV, you're entertaining the people. So it's very interesting. So, overall, like I think there's a lot of this stuff. Like you just got to be, the key is just having an open mind. When you have the open mind, that's when
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
what you do is when you're kind and respectful, when you say, please, thank you for allowing us to come into your
Mhm.
home or business. Thank you for, allowing us to conduct this investigation. When you're nice and respectful, you're going to
Yeah.
get a lot of response back. And
Yeah.
we've had no problems with any attachments on 22 plus investigations. And we're heading to 23 in June.
That's amazing. Now, I have to follow up with this because I have to ask one funny question.
Yes.
I've talked to paranormal investigators, and sometimes they say they've had ghosts get a little, how do I say, handsy, like grabbing things they shouldn't grab. Have you ever
Yeah.
had a ghost like grab one of your team or yourself, and you're like, whoa,
Not
okay, no.
not yet per se, but it's funny you mentioned the word grab because we actually had something interesting happen during World's Largest
Oh,
Ghost Hunt 21. We've
oh,
now jumped ship over to the competitor Global Ghost Hunt, but we were doing World's Largest Ghost Hunt. We actually were up in the violin room because I brought Melissa because I wanted to bring her back so she could experience the Sanderson Museum. We did that in September 2021 after a month that we did an investigation in Philly. So what's
mm,
wild was Rick and Melissa were upstairs, and literally when they came down the stairs, they saw all these equipment bags piled up near the stairs, and they're like, "Hey, did you and Sasha, our former
okay.
team member who left at this time, pile up all those equipment bags in the corner of the room so we couldn't get
Yeah.
by?" And we said, "No, we did not touch those equipment bags." And then when we went back and we did a EVP session. We call our version EVP session Phantom Time, where the fans come out
Yeah.
and talk to us. So we did that EVP session, and literally you could hear this one woman say, "Be afraid." And we think this was the mother of Christian Sanderson. Her name was Hannah. She died, according to the history that I've done on research of the place. She died in this place sometime in the 1940s from
Oh,
tuberculosis. So I think this was her piling up the equipment to not allowing us to leave. So we've never been
yeah.
grabbed yet per se, but we've had our equipment bags that grabbed and piled up on. And funny thing is, we didn't have a
Wow.
camera on it. Had we had that, that would have been the most amazingest evidence ever. you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah. Right. So, what one place haven't you investigated yet that's on your bucket list per se that you want to investigate?
Sure, there's a lot of places. I mean, I would say for me in the Philadelphia region, Fort Mifflin is definitely one I want to get back
Mm,
out to.
yeah.
I did public investigations there, but I never done private. That's one that I want to do. I want to do White Hill Mansion in Fieldsburg, New Jersey.
Oh, yeah.
And of course there's also the Battleship, New Jersey. I want to eventually get out and do that, like which is
Yeah.
another place, another bucket list place. For me, of course, Waverly Hills out in Kentucky.
Oh,
Um,
right.
Trans Allegheny Lunatic Asylum out in West Virginia. I think
Oh,
that one's out there. So Myrtle's
yeah.
Plantation. There's a
Yeah.
ton out there. We're eventually going to get out
Yeah,
to.
that's amazing. So, thank you so much, Joshua. You've given your time for this. This was amazing. I've had a ton of fun. I would love to have you back on the show because there's just so much I didn't get to ask you. But what do you got coming up here? What do you got coming up
Sure.
that my spooky friends can check out?
Sure. So we have a couple things that are going to be coming up here on the horizon in the next few months. Of course, May 31st, we're going to be doing a tour of this place. It's a well-known kitchen base, and it supposedly used to be a tavern. So we're going to be doing a tour and eating lunch there on May 31st. So before we do
Nice.
an investigation, so we got that coming up in May. And of course, later this year, we're actually still waiting to hear back from the board in Southern Delaware, but we might be eventually be and open up 13 buildings in this museum complex. We might start
Oh,
hosting public paranormal investigations there. So that's
nice.
also in the horizon. And then we got 2 television appearances coming up in August. So we're definitely working on getting bigger and better. And hopefully in the near future, we'll eventually have a television show. But for now, we're just going to continue to work and start locally and just keep building the evidence that we've collected and just continue to network and grow. So we got a campsite thing because Holly came up with this idea called Camp Paranormal with Ryan Buell when she
Oh,
was working
right.
for PRS. We're going to eventually have people go to a campsite with us and camp with us, and we'll tell like ghost stories, set up equipment
Nice.
demonstrations, do lectures. So this is just something I'm working on and starting to contact campsites. So there's a lot of really cool things
Yeah.
coming up. So in the next year.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, I'd love to have you back on the show because there's just so much I didn't get to that, we could talk about maybe after some
Oh,
investigations you
and
do and
before we
everything like
wrap
that.
up, I'd love
Yeah.
to plug in all of our websites if that's okay with you.
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Sure. So Melissa's website, if you need a psychic reading done, if you need anything about mediumship questions, if you want to go to Melissa, her website is psychicmediumautumn.com. All one word, psychicmediumautumn.com, and I'll email that
Okay.
over to you. If you
Thank
have
you.
if you have questions on UFOs, any kind of quantitative analysis, and you need to have Rick research a case, he can be reached at ERC extra erc2explore.com. So it's
Okay.
erc2explore.com. To reach our team member Holly Faust, if you have questions on occult symbols and spiritual beliefs, she's working with us
Mhm.
remotely. Her website is hollyfaust.com. There's also if you want to have any kind of paranormal news stories you want to submit to me, I still keep the Dark Matter News brand going, mainly just a written based on the website,
Okay.
because since art's no longer living, that's all one word, darkmatternews.com. And then a team website, which is a central hub of everything. It's phantomdetectives.org. That's all one word, phantomdetectives.org. And if you want to reach our other researcher, Mark Anthony, the world-renowned psychic lawyer, psychic explorer, has been on Gaia TV coast to coast with George Norrie. His website is afterlifefrequency.com.
Amazing, amazing. You're an amazing person, Joshua, for doing all these things. You got an amazing team. This was unbelievable, and I can't thank you enough for being on. And like I said, I'd love to have you on in the future because we
Sure.
could talk about more stuff, especially when it gets to Halloween. One of the things I would love to do sometimes is get all my paranormal investigators I've interviewed across the country and have like a live forum where you guys would talk about whatever we wanted to talk about, whether women
Sure.
in the paranormal, whether how the paranormal has changed over the years, topics like that. I would love to do that because I'm just so fascinated by the paranormal and love paranormal investigators like yourself who are getting out there and brave enough to do the things you do and to put yourself out there. I can't say enough other than thank you. And
No
thank
problem.
you for all the people that are watching you and have said, hey, maybe I'm going to take a second look. Maybe this isn't, what I
Yeah,
think it is, right? And
exactly.
maybe I'll try my own investigation, or maybe I'll start my own team.
That's what I
And
love.
right, yeah, yeah. So again, thank you so much. We end every podcast by saying, "Say hi to your ghost," because you might have a ghost, right? You got to say hi, hello, ghost,
Hello,
and
Newz.
then we say, "Stay spooky." Thanks, Joshua.
Thank you.
Have a great one.
You too.